Hello all, welcome to the session on requirement lifecycle management knowledge area. And in this session, we will speak about the fourth task, which would be assess requirement changes. Now, just to give you a recap as to what we have done in our previous sessions, we have been discussing exclusively about the knowledge area, requirement lifecycle management, and we spoke about the first task, which is trace requirements. And the requirements can be traced on various characteristics. And apart from that, once you have done the tracing of the requirements, you also need to maintain the requirements. Maintaining the requirement is all about how can you reuse your requirements for the future use, and a better maintenance of your requirements in a proper way will lead to less complexity in regards to the maintenance of the requirements. And apart from that, we also discussed about the prioritization task, which happens to be the third task in requirement lifecycle management. The prioritization task is about how do you go about prioritizing your requirements. And there are different parameters to that. The highest parameter being in that area is about which requirement is going to deliver the highest business value, and a requirement which delivers highest business value, would automatically be treated as the highest priority requirement. And in my previous session, I also gave examples how we take up this prioritization when we are working on in agile environment, and more so in Scrum. And all of us would have done product backlog grooming. And when we do product backlog grooming, we are invariably doing prioritization of the product backlog items, which are user stories. Now, prioritization also happens in predictive, but the challenge in prioritization is the stakeholder would want every requirement which has been mentioned either in a BRD or a user story which is there in product backlog. For the stakeholder, everything is a top priority. So in such a situation, you might have to apply some prioritization techniques, such as you must have heard about Moscow, must have, should have, could have. You also have a couple of other techniques which are voting can be again one more technique. You assign votes to a particular requirement, and it may so happen a requirement which gets the maximum vote would definitely become the highest priority requirement. So we also do another way of prioritizing is time boxing. And when we talk about time boxing in Agile, the highest priority requirements will be delivered in the first sprint. That's what you do out there. So these are the three tasks that we discussed in the previous sessions. One was trace requirements, then again maintain requirements, and prioritize requirements. Now, in this session today, we will discuss about assess requirement changes. And when we speak about assess requirement changes, so assess requirements changes, if we talk about, if you look at it here, the purpose of assess requirement changes is to evaluate the implications. The implication word is important of proposed changes to requirements and design. Now, as you have been practicing business analyst, most of you would know, you have a BRD. Once it gets baselined, the changes to the BRD, if they have to be done, it has to undergo a proper change management process. That's what you would have to do. And similar cases also, how changes are going to be handled in Agile, and more so in Scrum also. There is definitely a mechanism that you follow, or a process that you follow to handle change in both the approaches, which is predictive and adaptive. All the more it will be very formal if you talk about a predictive approach, but it will not be that formal when we talk about adaptive approaches. But in both the scenarios, whenever a new change is requested, and that change, we generally use a very short term for that, CR, change request. So you would have to evaluate the implications. That implication sometimes also you refer to with another word which we call it as impact analysis. So the assessed requirement change task is performed as a new need or possible solutions are defined. Assessment must be performed to determine whether a proposed change will increase the value of a solution. If so, what action will be taken? The action can be accepted for implementation, it can be deferred, or it can be rejected. Those are the things. So what are the inputs that you get for this particular task? Is you get a proposed change. And when we speak about a proposed change basically comes from the customer or a stakeholder. It can be identified at any time and impact any aspect of business analysis work or deliverable completed till date. So while you're doing your business analysis work, and in many situations and circumstances, as you keep discovering more and more information and keep doing analysis, many new things may unfold. And sometimes you may unfold those new information, or it can be given by your customers or stakeholders, more so by stakeholders. So definitely the CR, when we talk about change request, is an input which drives the entire change management process. So definitely you require proposed changes. This is something which got added. If you see in the previous task, we only had requirements and design. Here we have proposed changes, and the two more tasks are requirement and design. And requirement design are basically the outputs of requirement analysis and design. Now let's look at assessment of formality. As I said, assessment of formality will be much more formal if you talk in terms of predictive approach. You must have seen in a predictive approach, we have a change configuration management boards are there, CCM boards are there. So whenever a CR comes into picture, the CR is subjected to a CCM process, change configuration management process, where the process is defined, stipulated, and before this a decision is taken on the CR, it has to go through the CCM process, where you have already decided upon who will be part of the CCM group, who are the reviewers, who are the approvers. All such process is clearly defined. And at the end of that process, you need to get an output, whether that change request which has been requested, will it be accepted, rejected, or withheld, maybe for future purposes. So all that you do, and it is going to be very formal if you talk about predictive. And this formality, the way you're going to be dealing with the change, if you remember, we've discussed about BAPM, business analysis, planning and monitoring, where we talked about BA governance process. The entire governance as a word, if you know, is all about how do you go about governing. So that's where business analysts will determine the formality of assessment process based on the information available. The apparent importance of the change and the governance process. The governance process is something which you already have planned in business analysis, planning and monitoring. So you would refer to that. And for all the changes, whichever you get, definitely you need to do impact analysis. What will be the impact on the benefit that will be gained by accepting the change? Now, when you talk about the benefit, let's say you're building a website. In a website, you know, if you integrate with a PayPal connectivity, and the customer has requested for a PayPal connectivity, what's the benefit they'll realize? The moment you integrate with PayPal connectivity, you can do transactions across the globe. People can pay in multiple currencies and whatever are identified by PayPal. So the benefit that your website is going to realize is that you will have multi-currency deals happening. But you also have to realize the impact analysis. What will be the impact? And here, the impact is the regulatory requirements have to be considered in detail. And this is one of the projects. When you talk about the regulatory, every country will have a regulations in terms of when they deal with the foreign exchange or the foreign non-country transactions in the form of different currencies. So those have to be considered. Without that, you just don't go and implement PayPal. So impact analysis you do, and then you possibly take a decision. I just give you an example of impact analysis in one aspect. The impact analysis can be done on various aspects, such as, you have to do it on the cost factor. When I say about the cost, what will be the cost, total cost to implement the change? And impact is again the number of customers of business or business processes affected if the change is accepted. This is very important. You are not working in a silo. When I say you don't work as an island. So every process is interconnected. This is process, another process is there, another process is there, another process is there, another process is there. And these processes plus people plus technology is something what becomes your business architecture. So you do change in one particular process, you may have to do changes in other processes too. It will definitely have an impact in other processes. So that's something that also you need to be considering when you talk about impact. The number of customers or business processes affected by the change is accepted. What will be the schedule of going about implementing that change? That comes into the schedule part. The impact to the existing delivery, commitments if the change is approved. We also talk about the urgency part when you talk about the level of importance, including the factors which drive necessities such as regulations, regulator or safety issues. So all these are the aspects that you will consider when you talk about impact analysis. And once you do that impact analysis, you also need to talk in terms of, what is the decision that you're going to take on the CR which is requested. CR, when I say change requested, which is requested, you may either approve it, you may deny it, or you defer the proposed change. So these are the possible course of action that you can take if you're talking in terms of the changes which have been requested. They may be authorized to approve, deny, or defer the proposed change. Now, what are the guidelines and tools that you need to have? Change strategy. If you see the change strategy, now this change strategy, we already have discussed in great length and detail when we spoke about a knowledge area, which is strategic analysis. It describes the purpose and direction for changes, establish the context for the change, and identify the critical components for the change. So this is what you would have to do when you're dealing with a change which is requested by any stakeholder, or the need also can be created by a market condition, both external and as well as internal conditions. A domain knowledge of and expertise in the business domain is needed to assess proposed requirement changes. You definitely need to do that. Governance approach you need to consider, yes, BAPM, business analysis, planning and monitoring. Again, I refer back. We always have planned for our governance approach when we spoke about our knowledge area called business analysis, planning and monitoring. We also spoke about legal and regulatory approach, legal and regulatory approach when you talk about, if you're changing a particular requirement or you're dealing with certain requirements which are highly regulatory in nature, and you might have to consider a great detail, them in greater detail before you go about doing the changes. So that's where, your change strategy, domain knowledge, governance approach, and your legal and regulatory approach is going to be, that need to be considered. And those will form into the bucket of guidelines and tools. You will also have a requirement architecture. If you remember, this requirement architecture is how requirements are stored and related. And if you keep referring back to my sessions, you must have seen this requirement architecture. We discussed about this in RADD. In short, when I say RADD, it is requirement analysis and design definition. So when we speak about requirement architecture, the requirements may be related to each other. Therefore, the business analyst examines and analyzes the requirement relationships to determine which requirements will be impacted by a requested requirement change and all. You also need to do something which we call it as a solution scope also. Solution scope is very important because if you remember, whenever we speak about our BRD document or a vision and scope document, and in that those particular deliverables, we clearly specify which is in scope and which is out scope. Which is in scope and out scope. This really helps you to do an effective change management. You talk about that's where your solution scope comes into picture. Now, when we talk about the techniques, let's have a look at the techniques. The techniques are you have a business case. You would have a business rules analysis, you will have decision analysis, document analysis, estimations. Business cases have to be considered because you're talking about an initiative, and that initiative has to undergo, it has been undertaken only because of a business case which was created for that. That is, you have created an argument wherein you're suggesting to the organization which particular project that they can take up. That's where your business cases have come into picture. Now, whenever you're dealing with a change, you also need to consider business rules analysis. Let me again, elaborate. I've been doing that on every session, and of course, I will also do that in a separate session of techniques where I'll only be focusing on techniques only vis-a-vis which particular knowledge area and the task. So, business rules analysis. If you typically define a business rule, it is a constraint within which a business has to operate. And business rules, generally, when we talk about the way you go about depicting them, is catalog. You can use a catalog. You have a catalog on the higher, this one, where you define all the business rules, and you have follow it up with, your decision trees. And more complex decision trees is again one more way. And more complex way of depicting your business rules will be your decision tables. So decision tables also is something that you use whenever we talk about business rules analysis. Now, definitely they need to be considered when you're dealing with a change. You also need to talk about decision analysis. Yeah, decision analysis will be very, very important. You are trying to decide on whether the requested change request, whether it will be deferred, accepted, or will be rejected. When you're taking such kind of decisions, we need to consider the decision analysis, document analysis, definitely in order to understand how the current business processes are running and how the need changes may impact the current business processes. Estimation is also one more technique. You have to come up with the cost aspect of how much the change is going to cost, and you also need to estimate your timelines to do those, incorporate those changes. And in such a context, your estimation do come into picture. You will also need to do financial analysis. When I say financial analysis, if you have got a CR, and in short, when I say CR, is my change request. In order to implement a change request, how much it is going to cost. So costing aspect when you talk about, so the cost factor and all, to do that, you definitely need to have a financial analysis. Interface analysis is nothing but you do a change in a particular business process. Here you have done the change in the one business process, and your system is not, does not work in isolation. Any system that you have, the systems are interconnected. You may have one system, another system, another system, another system, another system. You have multiple systems are interconnected with each other. How many systems are interconnected with each other, and how does a change impact? In this scenario, that's where your interface analysis will come into picture. Now, that will really need to be considered when you're dealing with a change, because a change in your system may affect the other systems, and in doing so, how do you deal with that? So that is where your interface analysis will come into picture. Interviews definitely are a part of all 6 knowledge areas. If you remember a tip which I'm going to give you now, interviews is one technique which is there everywhere. In all the knowledge areas, you have interviews. Item tracking, there are certain things which you can't resolve at that moment of a time, so you can go for item tracking. Risk analysis and management, risk of implementing a particular requirement, risk of not implementing a requirement, you need to consider. And workshop is also, if you see, it will be there in most of the knowledge areas. So you pretty much use a lot of techniques which are there. And a tip whenever you deal with the changes happening to the requirement is, you should remember cost will come into picture. When cost comes into picture, financial analysis comes into picture. You would have to estimate everything, so estimation will come into picture. Whenever you're dealing with a change, many systems are working as a whole. So when you do a small change, what kind of impact it will have in other systems, interface analysis will come into picture. And apart from that, you have to consider the business rules also when you're doing some changes and all. So that's where your business rules are going to come into picture. The entire aspect of why you want to do a change is because of the business case. Business case is an argument that you have presented to do a change, that is business case. Document analysis, decision and those also you would consider. These are the techniques that you consider. And let's look at who are the stakeholders that we have here. We have a customer, we have a domain subject matter expert, end user, operational support, project manager. You will also need to consider regulator also, because there are a lot of requirements which can be regulatory in nature, sponsor, tester. Now let's look at what are the outputs. This is very important when we speak about the outputs. Everything is related to the requirement and design. So requirements change assessment, the recommendation to approve. This is approve, modify, or deny a proposed change to change to the requirements. So if a CR has come, change request has come, you will do an impact analysis, and once you have done the impact analysis based on many parameters, you will decide on that change whether you will approve it, whether you will modify it, or you'll deny the proposed change to the requirements. Same will you do with the design also. These both have to be considered. And if you see, these both are the outputs that we got because of requirement analysis and design definition. Just to sum it up, when we speak about, when we talk about assess requirement changes, it is about how do you deal with the changes which are happening to your requirements. What is the process you will have? The process is entirely determined by the approach you follow to develop a project. It can be a predictive approach, it can be an adaptive approach. Depending on that, you would have to plan your address the change. And once, based on the process, you will know what is the process you need to follow to deal with the change. Once you have done that, and definitely you need to do impact analysis, and once you have done the impact analysis and applied various techniques, you will decide whether to go for a change or not. And when you take that decision, the decision can be either to approve a requirement or deny, or modify that requirement, or a design. Both I'm talking about. When I say requirements, I also mean design also. So that's what we do in assess requirement changes. Once again, I request all of you to follow it up with one reading of the book. Also take up one simulation examination related to this knowledge area, and specifically to do this task. And once you have taken the examination, the strategy should be, after you take the exam, write down your answers, go through the answers. If you have done anything mistake, again refer back to this chapter, this particular task, and then go to an appropriate page and try to read out where you have done something wrong. So that's the strategy that you need to formulate. And here, your cheat sheet also is going to be very important. The cheat sheet which we have given you, which gives you a complete picture of a particular knowledge area. So once again, I thank you on behalf of Acesynergi Solutions for attending this session. And let's catch up on our last session for this particular knowledge area, which would be approve requirements. Thanks a lot, and all of you have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.